Life's too short to do anything but follow your heart. I really believe that each of us is called to a hero's journey, to go on this incredible life adventure, this incredible hero's journey. It's never too late to answer the call within your own heart that's calling you to follow some purpose that's there within you.
So being a publicly traded company and then being part of Amazon, one hand gave you incredible resources to scale and grow Whole Foods Market. But on the flip side, I'm guessing there were probably some things you couldn't move quickly on because of bureaucracy or shareholders, or maybe things you really wanted to say but couldn't. What comes to mind?
What I couldn't say about what? The merger or?
About anything, about Whole Foods, about the merger. I think about it, there is being public.
Fair question. So back in 2007, I wrote an op-ed piece for the Wall Street Journal on healthcare. The Affordable Care Act, Obamacare was coming out, and I went hiking right after I pushed send. I was in the 100-mile wilderness in Maine for a week with no contact with the outside world, and it blew up. It got published, and it blew up while I was on the trail, and it became incredibly controversial. There were literally thousands of people that wrote emails and letters to our board of directors demanding that I be fired. There were boycotts, organized boycotts of Whole Foods. There were protests at dozens and dozens of our stores, all demanding that I be fired. I had really kicked a hornet's nest. I've reread that that op-ed piece, and I can see why it was somewhat controversial, but it was just an opinion piece. But what I learned from that was people couldn't differentiate between me and Whole Foods. So I wrote an op-ed piece expressing my own personal opinions. I wasn't writing to represent Whole Foods in any official capacity, but I was the brand. So it hurt Whole Foods for me to write that op-ed piece. So after that, I've been on silent mode, you might say. I haven't been very outspoken. I realized that, like it or not, CEOs they represent their business always when they're in the public realm, and people don't differentiate between the personal and the public. So there are many things that I wrote about in the book that is coming out on May 21st, the whole story, that I had not ever discussed before in any way. I mean, for example, in the history of Whole Foods, there were 4 coups, 4 times people tried to take my CEO position from me, and maybe even 5 times, depending on one of the ones that's kind of marginal. And that was never publicly shared. I went and talked in the book a lot about Amazon and the merger and how it came about, why it came about, and how I felt about it after, kind of a summing up after I left. And overall, that merger was a very good thing for Whole Foods. But people ask me if I have any regrets. And the only regret I have is that the circumstances became such that that was the best solution to our problem, because we were being attacked by activists who were trying to take over our company and put it out for the highest bidder, and no telling how that might have turned out. And we could have fought, and I'll always wonder what might have happened if we'd fought. But at the time, Amazon was a very good solution for us because it enabled us to significantly drop our prices, which is, we needed to do that, and we couldn't easily do that as a public company, because if you're selling something for $1 and you drop it to 90 cents, well, your sales just dropped 10%. Your same store sales dropped. Your profits dropped. And in the long run, as people discover you have lower prices, then your sales will go up. But there's a lag period. And as a public company, it's difficult to execute that in a way that doesn't drive people nuts because they're so short-term focused. So that was the best solution for us. And there were other really good things about that merger. Amazon didn't directly try to change our culture. They were, particularly in the early days, were pretty respectful. And their technology really helped us. When COVID came along, we were able to use Amazon's technology for delivery, which became so important to the business model there for a couple of years. And we couldn't have done that, I don't think, on our own. But being able to tie in our loyalty program into Prime, we'd never had a loyalty program before. That was another plus. And in general, I enjoyed the time with Amazon. I had some conflicts. As one of the leaders told me towards when I was kind of getting ready to leave, he said, if you hadn't wanted to go control the Whole Foods, you shouldn't have sold it to us. And of course, he was right. I shouldn't have, if that was the main objective, to not lose control. But it wasn't. It was what was best for Whole Foods. And that merger was the best thing for Whole Foods at that time.
A lot to unpack there. And before I will say to everyone, I'll hold up the book, the whole story for those watching on YouTube. Definitely a must read for any fan of Whole Foods, any entrepreneur. It is just an unbelievable read. So congratulations. I really appreciate how candid you are in the book.
Thank you.
You share everything. So you mentioned the 4 attempted coups, possible 5th. Feels like one of those was probably the low point of your career.
Yeah. That was back in the year 2000.
And if one of the coups was a low point, what was the high point for you during your tenure as CEO?
I mean, of course, there were many high points, but as I mentioned in the book, the second happiest day of my life was my wedding day. And the second happiest day was when we did our initial public offering, our IPO. And I think that was back in 1992. And that was such a high point because everybody that had believed in me and had believed in Whole Foods, that had put their money and trust in us, they could get off the train if they wanted to. We were still going to grow tremendously, but now they had a way to sell their stock at a significant profit. So we had delivered and fulfilled the hopes and dreams and promises that we'd made. And that took a lot of, there were new pressures and new responsibilities that come with being a public company. But that ended that chapter of wondering whether or not we were going to be able to deliver for our original investors. We did. And that was a very, very, very happy day for me.
So that was almost, I would say, halfway through your journey. So I want to say it was 1975, 1976-ish.
Now, we started Saferway in 1978. So that was 14 years later. So we'll call that a third of the way in the journey. There were other peak days. When we opened our first store in New York, not our first store, our second store in Columbus Circle, and it just went crazy and it became our highest volume store in the company within a few months. It was in a basement. We weren't even sure we should do this location. That was a huge high point for us and for me personally. There were so many of them. The first time we opened a store outside of Texas in California, in Palo Alto, California, that was like when I first realized, my gosh, we could be a national company. We had 4 stores in Texas up to that point, and I wasn't sure whether or not we could go to another state, particularly California, for God's sake. That was going to be so much more difficult. So there were lots of these kind of high points along the way. And in general, the whole thing was a high point. Building a company and watching it grow, it's the biggest high I've ever had in life. If there's something better than that, I haven't experienced it yet. That is an amazing thing. And it's so much fun. You get to be creative. Jason, it's like playing basketball. You've got a team and you're passing the ball around and you go into battle together, and sometimes you lose, but that brings you tighter together, and sometimes you win and that also brings you tighter together. So it was just, when I look back on my Whole Foods career, it was so much fun. It was so much fun. And we made a lot of mistakes, but we learned from those mistakes. So the whole thing was it was all a high.
So almost 40, it's about 45 years.
44 years. My tenure was 44 years.
44 years. So what's the biggest change you've seen in grocery in that span of time?
A good chance that most of your audience isn't old enough to remember how grocery stores were before Whole Foods existed, but they were pretty terrible. They were very sterile. They were not the stores you see today. They weren't the H-E-B's or Wegmans or Kroger's, and the way they've evolved. And that's, I think, a lot due to Whole Foods' success. They just mostly were selling processed foods. They had very dingy produce departments, not very high quality perishables. They were so obsessed with price, and particularly being able to compete with Walmart, as Walmart went into the food retailing business. And I think Whole Foods helped. It obviously wasn't just Whole Foods. There was a movement, which in some ways Whole Foods was the business leader of that movement towards natural, organic foods. more plant-based eating. Whole Foods was kind of at the forefront of that revolution. We really championed organic foods. We helped get the laws passed to have regulations for that. We've worked on animal welfare programs. We helped pioneer a lot of the local return to local movement that Michael Pollan talked about in Omnivore's Dilemma. Whole Foods from a retailer proved that to be a viable concept. So there's so many ways that I think our company helped change the world, and how the grocery business changed as a result of Whole Foods. One of the realities of capitalism is just that good ideas get copied. And so Whole Foods had a lot of competition, and the mainstream supermarkets copied a lot of our best ideas. They copied our products. They copied a lot of our marketing. They began to design their stores more similar to ours. And in some ways, that's a really good thing, because that helped fulfill our higher purpose and why we existed as a business in the first place: nourish people on the planet. And if the supermarkets changed because of Whole Foods, well, that's a good thing. Although, of course, it wasn't necessarily great for our business.
So you mentioned competition, and two retailers immediately come to mind, one on a larger scale and one much smaller scale, and that would be Sprouts and Erewhon. I'm curious your take on those two.
I'm surprised you didn't say Trader Joe's. We always saw them as a main competitor.
Well, let's add them as a third.
Well, what's interesting about both Sprouts and Erewhon is they flank Whole Foods in two different directions. Sprouts is trying to be less expensive, and to have their stores are smaller. They they don't sell as much organic, uh, but they do have natural foods, and they're lower priced, and they keep their costs down. So that's a and then Erewhon's exactly the opposite. And they're trying to beat Whole Foods with higher quality, and their prices are significantly higher. And but they've appealed to the celebrity. They're kind of a Los Angeles phenomenon. They appeal to the Hollywood celebrity set. Of course, if I was still running Whole Foods, we'd be competing directly with both of those formats. The current Whole Foods management doesn't really want to compete with Erewhon and their thing. I wanted to create another brand we were going to call Ideal Market. We opened one in the Denver area, and it's done well. So we thought we could do another chain that was doing that. So I respect both Sprouts and Erewhon a lot. I think if they were, from a competitive standpoint, they hit Whole Foods in different ways, but effectively. Both are successful businesses. Sprouts in particular has really, I've watched their stock price increase in the last couple of years. They're obviously, Jack Sinclair, the CEO, is doing a good job managing that company. And Erewhon is a phenomenon. I mean, their stores are exciting to be in. Uh, I think Whole Foods should be studying Erewhon and a lot of their. I mean, if you can do celebrity smoothies for $20, well, and sell tens of thousands of them, you've got a hot idea.
What's so interesting about Erewhon is years ago, Whole Foods would get flack for their prices. Whole paycheck. We've all heard it, and I think that to some degree has been debunked. And Erewhon just completely leans into it. Erewhon is very, very expensive, and it is in the epicenter and the what. It's a LA based company, and they just completely lean into it and own it. I'm not sure if that brand, to your point, can scale in the way that a Whole Foods or a Sprouts has across the country, given its price point.
That's what a lot of people said about Whole Foods when we were cranking up. What ends up happening is that is Erewhon an LA phenomenon? It clearly is. Is it only an Erewhon phenomenon? We won't know until they try to take it outside. What you have to understand is that Erewhon they're still seen as a startup, even though they've been around longer than anybody else going back to their macrobiotic roots in Boston. They've been around a long time. But this direction that the ownership's taken in is a new direction. And so they're sort of seen as a startup. They don't have that many stores. And what I have found in my own experience is that when you're a startup, the media loves you. You're new and exciting. You're the new kid on the block. You're doing things nobody else is doing. You get a lot of publicity, and you get this virtuous spiral. Now, what happened to Whole Foods is after we went public and people saw that we were very profitable and that we were growing. And then the next thing I knew, we were the same company, the same values, But now the media turned on us. We were no longer the upstart startup. We were the big corporation that was putting out of business other natural food stores, and it was whole paycheck. We were too expensive. So Erewhon is still in that flush of everybody loves them, and the people, they just overlook their high prices, or as you say, they lean into it because if you shop at Erewhon, you're also making a statement about yourself. Just like if you buy a Ferrari, you're making a statement about yourself. And so one thing you're saying is I can afford to shop at Erewhon. People used to say that about Whole Foods in our early days. I'm really dedicated to my health, and by the way, I can afford to shop there. So, but as you get bigger and your chain grows, and if particularly if the media starts seeing your financial statements, if they ever, I mean, one of Trader Joe's big competitive advantages is that they're privately held. Nobody ever sees their financial statements. That company makes so much money, it's unbelievable. But nobody knows it because they don't talk to the media and nobody gets to see their financial statements. Hey, nobody sees Whole Foods financial statements any longer either. It's buried in the Amazon financial statements.
And what do you think Trader Joe's does well? Sorry if you finish your thought.
Trader Joe's is a very interesting company, and I talk about them in the book a little bit. That I watched them back when Joe Colombo was owned the business, was running it before he sold it to the uh, the Albrecht family in Germany. They were kind of this interesting business that Joe was kind of, it's Trader Joe's. It was named after him. Joe liked to go make deals, and he would get wine closeouts, and he would buy food that people were trying to unload. And so initially they had some natural foods, but they were kind of this hodgepodge with a lot of inexpensive wine. That was kind of their trademark. And they didn't really take off until they started selling produce. And then they had frozen meat and frozen fish, and they became still a limited assortment store, but they were so good at private label. Trader Joe's is the best in the business in private label, in my opinion. And Whole Foods always tried to copy Trader Joe's, but they're usually two steps ahead of us in the private label area. So they were a company. I got to be good friends with Doug Rao, who's in the conscious capitalism movement with me. And Doug was president of Trader Joe's for a number of years, and he kind of ran their East Coast operations. And as Doug said it, he said, Trader Joe's made Whole Foods a better company, and Whole Foods made Trader Joe's a better company. We needed each other because we innovated in different directions, and we studied and copied each other, and that made us both better operators. I thought about it, and I said, I think you're right, Doug. It's true. We certainly studied Trader Joe's, and if you say you studied Whole Foods and we help make you better, I will say Trader Joe's helped make us better.
A healthy view on competition.
What's kind of interesting, Jason, is that, of course, I'm always going to love Whole Foods. I'm not going to shop anywhere else. It's my baby, and it's grown up now, and I'm not really involved at all anymore at Whole Foods at all. That was a gift to let the founder, co-founder, longtime CEO just ride into the sunset, do something else, and not have that management team have me looking over their shoulder and not pestering Amazon in any way. So I just completely let it go. But so that means I can talk sort of dispassionately about Trader Joe's, about Erewhon, about any of the competitors that I wouldn't have, while I was CEO, I'd be telling it a little bit differently. Like, we're going to kick those guys' asses.
Well, I appreciate that view. And as you ride into the sunset and understanding it is your baby, where do you see Whole Foods going in the next 5 or so years? Where do you want them to go?
I mean, I'm like you, I can only speculate because I don't know. I'm not in on the strategy any longer. The company's becoming more centralized, and they're trying to cut costs. They cut costs, they can lower prices. So I see that trend. They're trying to, Amazon's a very highly efficient company, and I believe they are challenging Whole Foods, pressuring Whole Foods to get its costs down, to be able to enable it to lower its prices. And I think that's something you'll see that will continue to happen. They're definitely more cost conscious than they were, and more driven to lower costs and lower prices, and hopefully without cutting quality.
So what's interesting about that, I still have a lot of friends who are entrepreneurs and have their products on shelves at all the retailers you mentioned, and Whole Foods still has a reputation for being friendly to the small business. And I'll use and the numbers may be slightly off, but directionally, I think they're accurate. You probably have a better sense, but I think Whole Foods takes like a 38 margin from the manufacturer, and I think excuse me, makes 38. Erewhon's at 60. So if you think about like, okay, I'm an entrepreneur. Erewhon needs to make 60. Whole Foods needs to make 40. Like that's not really entrepreneur friendly at Erewhon. Where I appreciate I think most entrepreneurs will appreciate the lower margin at scale.
I think maybe Whole Foods is trying to work a little lower than that now. So, but I don't know. I'm really kind of out of the loop. I mean, I know that the objective is to cut costs and lower prices. Cut costs, lower prices. Can't lower prices if you don't lower your gross margins. I can tell you that with the Amazon merger, we lowered in the first 2 years of that merger, we cut our gross margins and we lowered prices. And Amazon wanted us to do that. We wanted to do it. They wanted us to do it, and we did it. So are they still lowering prices now? I don't really know.
So on that note, for someone listening who's a Whole Foods shopper, any advice, tips, tricks, how to shop in the most efficient way from everything you've learned, whether it's for promo, whether it's to, what's your insider view on shopping at Whole Foods?
Well, I do shop at Whole Foods. I'm only 50 yards from the flagship store. I'm actually in my old office from where we took the offices that were the corporate headquarters of Whole Foods from 1995 to 2005. And we moved into part of that. And so I'm kind of exactly where I was in terms of my location. Uh, and I'm very close to, I'm 50 yards from where my old office was at Whole Foods, so not far away. In terms of shopping, so I get to shop at that store 2 or 3 times a week, every week. And I just know what I want. I shop with a list. I do think you should shop with a list. And I fill the list. I tend to shop pretty rapidly. Although I'm recognized a lot in the store by both customers and team members who want to talk. And so
I bet you are.
I do put that into the time allotment I have for shopping. I'm plant-based, so I mostly just shop the produce department. Produce department is 3/4 of my food basket, and then I fill it up with the other things that we might need from the bulk department or tofu, almond milk, things like that. So if you're asking for tips to shop, I mean, you should look for Whole Foods has a lot of specials. Depends on what your goal is. They have a lot of specials. And you should be a Prime member, because the Prime members do get a better deal. They get better prices on a lot of the stuff. So when you check out, you need to show your Prime Amazon Prime number. Here's my biggest tip: if you are a regular Whole Food shopper, you need to get either the Amazon credit card, or the Whole Foods Market now has a branded credit card. You need one of those credit cards, because you get 5% back on everything you buy from Whole Foods and from Amazon. That is a tremendous thing. 5%. If you buy as many groceries as I do, I'm basically getting a 5% discount every time I shop. And I get 5% off every time I shop at Amazon, because my Amazon credit card is hooked into my Apple Pay. So every time I check out, it's automatically going into that account. So that's a money saving tip. Those are a couple of money saving tips.
That is meaningful. So you mentioned you're plant-based. I remember when, the Beyond Meats of the world were getting a ton of press, the stock was going through the roof. You were critical, and you're plant-based. You said this isn't a health food, but I'm glad it's plant-based, but let's call it for what it is. And I think there are some who view that specific category, kind of call it the fake meats that are highly processed, as a fad. I'm curious, what's your take? What do you think is, you've got tremendous perspective. What do you think is a little bit fatty right now, if you will?
One of the things that I call it the zombie, because you can never quite kill it. It just keeps coming back in different iterations. If you go back to the Atkins diet in the 70s, you had the Atkins diet. The low carb movement is one that, despite the fact that it doesn't really work in the long term, it is so much what people want to believe it has a temporary weight loss component to it as you begin a low carb diet, because mostly from water loss. And that comes back and keeps iterating. So you have the Atkins movement, and then, you had the South Beach diet. If you look back at a lot of the best-selling diet books, they were low carb books. And we had the paleo, and we had, then you had the ketogenic. Now you got the carnivore. It keeps getting there's just this great desire for people who don't like vegetables very much to want to believe that eating a low carb diet, high protein diet is some kind of magical formula for health and longevity when it really isn't. So that's a fad, but it just is one that kind of keeps reincarnating in different iterations of it, right? So I don't know what'll be after the ketogenic, Paleolithic to ketogenic to carnivore. I don't know what the next iteration of that fad will be, but it'll still be with us because I've seen it for the last 50 years in one form or another.
I get that one. I think it can work for some people, but not everyone.
Well, no one's ever going to argue against that because it probably does work for someone somewhere at some time. But does the science support it as a diet for most people to be eating on a long-term basis? I mean, to go into ketosis is a natural thing. We evolved fasting as hunters and gatherers. We had times where we didn't have enough food. In fact, getting enough calories was our biggest challenge. So our body evolved in such a way that we could live without carbohydrates. We'd start to make ketones in our system. And then the body would also cleanse itself during a fast. So there's no question in my mind that doing a low carb diet or doing ketosis from time to time as a way to tune up your body is a good idea. But is it what we should be doing on a day-to-day, long-term basis? I really question that. I just don't think the science is there. We know that if you look at the blue zones people, all the longest lived people are basically plant and carbohydrate eaters. I don't mean by carbohydrates, I don't mean sugar and processed foods and processed grains. I mean beans. I mean millet and whole wheats and brown rice and whole grains. And that's what people have eaten that for most of our evolutionary history. And we've been carbohydrate eaters. Our bodies have evolved to be good at processing whole food, plant-based foods. So does that mean it works for everybody? No, I don't think there is a diet. One of my things I've learned is that there's not the perfect diet. I mean, and there's individual, you might say there's sort of biological individuality. So as you said, Jason, some people do better. Some people don't do well. Some people do better on fat. I don't. I personally do much better on carbohydrates, but maybe that's just me. I can't deny, I don't want to say there's one solution for all, but I'm going to say that for most people Michael Pollan said it so well. He just said, eat real food, mostly plants, not too much. There you have it. That's the dietary philosophy, in my opinion, for the 21st century. Michael nailed it.
There you go. So I'm curious, over the course of your tenure, what have you changed your views on business and health? What immediately comes to mind? One of my favorite sayings internally here is strong beliefs loosely held.
Well, what I just articulated was one belief I've changed. I've become a little more open-minded that different strokes for different folks and that one size doesn't fit all. So that's from a food standpoint. In terms of business itself, and then I also articulated earlier how my views have changed about certain competitors, and I can put them in perspective now. I can see where Erewhon is. I can see where Sprouts is. I can see where Trader Joe's is. And pretty much all the competitors, I can see them a little bit more dispassionately than I could when I was competing with them on a day-to-day basis. In terms of business itself, I mean, the book itself is kind of, I don't really pull any punches in the book about myself. I'm very candid about a lot of the mistakes that I've made, how a lot of my views changed over time. that part of building a business is making mistakes and learning and changing your views. I mean, I describe in detail how I became plant-based and why I did back in 2003. And so my views about eating changed radically as a result of that as I began to study it. I'm the kind of guy, I think of myself as a person that changes his mind when I get new data and new evidence. I find that to be fairly rare in life. Most people, confirmation bias is rampant. If you make an argument somebody doesn't understand or doesn't agree with or can't answer, they don't change their beliefs. Instead, they do a Google search and they find somebody that comes up with arguments that reinforce what they already believe. So we increasingly live in a world with a kind of an echo chamber where people are in their own little tribes believing and being reinforced by each other and not really open to the evidence. What does the science say? They even question whether science is a valid way to get truth any longer. If you're a really postmodernist, you just think science is another narrative like any other narrative, and all narratives are equal. Just make up anything you want. So I still believe in science. I believe in rationality. I believe in evidence and facts. And so I've grown so much as a business person. I've changed so many views over the 44 years I did Whole Foods. I guess the thing I learned the most about is people and who you can trust and who you can't trust. Because I did feel betrayed, multiple times as I built the business. Uh, I used the metaphor of the Ring of Power from the Lord of the Rings, which I love fantasy, and that's arguably the greatest fantasy book ever written, or books ever written. And part of the Lord of the Rings is the Ring of Power, which is the power ring is the one ring that rules them all in the Lord of the Rings mythology. But it's very hard to wear that Ring of Power without being corrupted. And in those particular books, as people got close to the ring, they wanted that ring themselves, and they would often try to kill to get it. Well, being a CEO of a growing company that's, when I left, it was $22 billion in business, over 105,000 team members. That's a very seductive power that many people are attracted to and want that ring for themselves. So my view of human nature evolved over time. And I became more discerning in those people that I could trust, those who were just casual friends, and those who were basically simply opportunists that were looking for something. I could go on and on and on because there's just so many lessons that are there about business, about life. That's one of the great things about doing a business, by the way, Jason, is you learn so much about people. You learn so much about life. You learn so much about how the world works that when you're 20 years old, you're just, like I see it today, young people are such utopians. They really believe that we could create some kind of utopia, that there's a simple fix for the challenges that humanity faces. There's never a simple fix. It's always complex, and we have to learn and grow as individuals.
So, not many people can form an idea, create a business, start a business from scratch, have that business be a mission-driven company that ends up going public, worth billions of dollars and changing the world fundamentally. Is it luck, fortune, strengths, weaknesses, all the I'm curious, what do you think is your secret sauce?
I think first that in this case, I don't think luck is always an element in life. And the lucky thing about what we did at Whole Foods is that is it when a surfer catches a wave and rides it a long time, part of it's luck. You got to catch the big wave. And it turned out that natural and organic foods was a big wave, but most people didn't realize it back in the 70s. And so we weren't trying to catch a big wave. The founders of Whole Foods, we were just very idealistic people who wanted to, very simply, we wanted to sell healthy food to people, earn a living, and have some fun. That was what it was all about back when we were in our 20s. And then the wave grew and we surfed it and we continued to surf it. And we helped make the wave bigger. And so there's an element of being able to catch the right wave. If you don't catch the right wave, then you won't get very far. But on the other hand, you have unlike that surfing metaphor, it's not just luck. It's also a certain amount of skill. If you're asking me what my superpowers were, so to speak, and why I was successful, I think first of all, because I am very passionate and very purpose driven. And in that sense, I have a certain charisma. And I was able to attract people with my strong sense of purpose and meaning because everybody wants purpose in their lives. I was able to attract people that shared a similar purpose. And also that I could help light the flame within them. I could pass the torch and light that flame in them and get them as passionate and as excited as I was. That's every good. Elon Musk is doing that with his businesses. He gets people so excited about what he's trying to do that it attracts people that want to share that passion. And I think I have that gift as well. Also, I think maybe because I played competitive sports like basketball, it's about the team. I mean, Whole Foods is successful not because of me primarily, but because of what we did collectively as a team. And I was able to attract the right people to the team, nurture them, empower them, and then they attracted other people to the team, and we built this incredibly great team. And the team did great things together. What Whole Foods wouldn't be where it was if I didn't have Walter Robb working with me, or AC Gallo, or Glenda Flanagan, or Jim Sudd, or Jason Beekle, and a lot of the people to name in the book, that David Mathis, that the regional presidents. We had such a great young group of people that were dedicated to our mission and purpose. And we got people, we came out of the counterculture. We were hippies. And there were so many people that were looking for purpose and meaning back in that day that were extraordinarily intelligent people, like Walter Robb and AC Gallo, that didn't go the professional route. They didn't become doctors or lawyers, but they were extremely intelligent, IQ people that got involved in the food retailing, groceries, natural foods. And they came into the Whole Foods market system. And you might say together, we created it, we built it, we grew it. So my superpowers were having this passion and a sense of purpose, and then also being able to attract and hold on to really, really talented people. It's like, if you're using a basketball metaphor, just having one good player, you're not going to win a championship. You got to have several good players, and furthermore, they can't just be great players. They have to play well as a team. They have to be unselfish. They have to do what's best for the company, best for the team. And I think we did that at Whole Foods.
And so if that's your superpower, what's your blind spot? What's your weak spot?
I find people's weaknesses tend to come out of their strengths. And this is a paradox, but if you think about it for yourself, you might see it as true. So I'm a very optimistic person. I always believe the future is going to be better than the past, and I'm very driven that way. I also empower people. In a lot of ways, I'm very trusting of people, and that's tremendous superpower. But the flip side of that is I sometimes made mistakes. I misjudged people. I empowered the wrong people. I trusted the wrong people. I tend to be an entrepreneurial, so I have a lot of entrepreneurial energy. That's a good thing. That's a strength. On the other hand, there's a time to be entrepreneurial and there's a time not to be entrepreneurial. I wasn't always good at judging when the hell to look at the data and tamper down the entrepreneurial urges just because I felt them. I wasn't always successful in bridling myself back, and the team wasn't able to do it as well. So we made some mistakes. Fortunately, none of them were fatal mistakes, but we did have some setbacks, which you got to talk about in the book. So I guess on balance, I had enough strengths to overcome my weaknesses. And I would say one other thing. I'm a very passionate learner. It's a theme I've had all my life. I really like to learn. I like to create. So I didn't have any business background at all. I never took a business class in college. I never read a business book. I started up Saferway, and I read hundreds of business books because now I was really into it. And I just picked up knowledge. And if we made a mistake, so remember how I was talking about before we started this, about how I stopped drinking because of my Apple Watch, because it gave me data. I changed my behavior because of that. Well, it's the same way in business. If something's not working, change it. And if something's working at some other company, copy it. So an entrepreneur is constantly gaining knowledge from every day, from every experience. There's an opportunity to learn from your mistakes and learn from others so you don't even have to make the mistakes in the first place. So I guess that's a superpower as well. I'm a very quick, dedicated learner, and I'm also able to change. I'm able to change my beliefs. I'm able to change as I think the facts present themselves to me. And I found out as I got older that most people don't ever change their beliefs. If you, I don't see my beliefs. I know I'm going on a little long here. Let me just say that I'm not that attached to my beliefs in a way. If the facts change, I change my beliefs. It's kind of like wearing clothes. I'm not my clothes. Take my clothes off, and that's not who I am. Well, for most people, perhaps their beliefs, they identify their self with their beliefs. So if the beliefs are attacked, they feel like they're being personally attacked. I don't feel that way. If you attack my beliefs, I'll think, well, what's your evidence? Let me hear your arguments. If they're good ones, I'll change my beliefs. That has been a superpower and a strength for me because it's enabled me to change and make sometimes change on a dime if necessary.
I love it. And I think you just summarized all the endless bickering between those in their space on nutrition.
I'm just looking at the evidence.
So what do you think is the biggest misconception about John Mackey?
Oh, it's hard to say because different people have different misconceptions. One of my friends who's read, the early copies of the book are out now, and of course I'm giving them to friends. And I've had maybe a couple of friends come up and say, I didn't really understand you until I read this book. I feel like I now really understand you. And these are people that have known me for 20, 30 years or even longer. So they had misconceptions about me and they knew me well. And now the puzzle fits better, it fits together better as they see a more totality of who I am come out in the book. I think the biggest misconceptions are people's own projections that we put onto other people. And the biggest projections put onto me, as I always say that, like when people that like Whole Foods like me. People that don't like Whole Foods Market don't like me. That's one thing I've experienced. And all in all, a lot of people don't like Whole Foods. And then because I have been outspoken in the past, people think they know me. Like they think they know my political beliefs, for example, but they don't. Because in the book, I try to talk about, I really feel like I'm integral in my thinking and that I'm not either a traditionalist, a modernist, or a progressive. That integral takes the best qualities of each of these thought frameworks and integrates them together. I think that's a misunderstanding. A popular misconception about me is that that I'm right wing or that I've got. I mean, I just don't fit well into people's categories. I'm an individual.
I agree. I would say as I've gotten to know you over the years, you don't fit in a box for sure. You cannot put John Mackey in a box.
It has to be a very unique box.
Any advice for mission-driven entrepreneurs who might be listening?
I have given a lot of good advice, I think, already, but
besides pick up the book, I'm going to hold up again. The book really is an amazing read. It is. You were so candid and vulnerable, and it's just tremendous wisdom. I encourage everyone to pick it up.
One of the things I had to learn in Whole Foods, and I explain it by telling a story that I tell in the book. Safer Way, the first store Renee and I co-founded, we were living in a vegetarian co-op. We were both vegetarians. And so Safer Way was a vegetarian store. And it didn't do well. It wasn't successful. I mean, it started to make money in our second year, but in general, it wasn't really going to be a very successful business. And we had to make a decision. We merged with another store and we made a decision that we wanted to be a real grocery store. So we sold meat and chicken and fish, and we sold beer and wine, and we sold coffee. These might be things that we didn't consume ourselves, but we know the market wanted it. And we had quality standards. We stayed true to natural. We focused on organic foods, but we sort of, so one of the things, if you're a mission-driven entrepreneur, is that mission has to meet the marketplace. And this is something people don't understand, that you're in a dialogue with your customers. Hey, you can tell from our previous conversation, I'm not a huge proponent of the ketogenic or the carnivore diets. And yet, Whole Foods Market promoted those diets because the customers wanted it. So you're in the business of satisfying your customers while simultaneously trying to fulfill your higher purpose. And so it's very important that if you're mission driven, that you keep the mission in mind, but you have to understand that if you're too rigid in your purpose and mission and you don't meet the marketplace where you find it, you probably fail as a business. That you have to adapt. You don't have to throw your mission out the window. You keep it, but you have to be strategic about it over the long term, realizing that you can't just force people to change the way they eat or what they believe or what they want to do. Instead, you have to satisfy your customers. That's ultimately the first and most important rule of every business: satisfy your customers. However, that will compromise sometimes your mission in the short run. It doesn't mean you have to give it up. It just means that you have to think about it more strategically. And I just know a lot of mission-driven entrepreneurs do not want to have a dialogue with the marketplace, who are going to disagree with their particular strict interpretation of what they think the mission is. So it co-evolves. All the stakeholders co-evolve. Whole Foods co-evolved from all of our stakeholders. I mean, and that's important. Here's the thing. Entrepreneurs they create a business, and they tend to, there's a lot of ego attachment to that business. It's natural. It's your little baby and a child. Just like a parent has to let their child grow up and become who they are, so an entrepreneur has to let his or her business grow up and become what it wants to become. And it may be different than what the parent wants. The parent has to empower and let go and surrender, tries to influence, but doesn't try to strictly control, because otherwise you'll cripple the potential of that child or that business. I really think it's a good metaphor that an entrepreneur is like a wise parent who wants to influence it without strangling it to death. And it lets it go its own ultimate way, which may be a different way than what the entrepreneur would like.
Fantastic advice. And I want to segue to your latest venture, Love Life. Tell us more.
I'm super excited about Love Life. And it's people that want to know more, you can just go to our website, www.love.life. No .com, just love.life. We're opening up, think about it as like one-stop wellness medical centers or holistic health centers. We're going to open up a flagship location on July 9th in LA area, off the Pacific Coast Highway, technically in Beach Cities in El Segundo. And it's in an old Best Buy. Whole Foods has a very successful store in that center. And so we're going to have a healthy restaurant, not a vegan restaurant, a plant-forward restaurant, but with...
Whoa, hold on. Whoa, stop the presses. Did I just hear right? My friend John Mackey, who has been vegan for how many years, just said the restaurant was not 100% vegan?
I've been vegan for 21 years. We opened a vegan restaurant. Love Life opened a vegan restaurant in Culver City a year ago. It's about a year ago now, and it failed within 4 months. And so it's like, you know what? This is talking to the market again. So we're opening what I call a plant-forward restaurant. So vegans will be happy, but if you get a bowl, you can add on grass-fed beef. You'll be able to add on wild-caught salmon.
Are all the vegans really going to be happy, John?
No, they're going to be very unhappy at me, and I'm going to be accused of being a traitor. But you have to meet the marketplace where you find it. Here's what the vegans will be happy about. They can get amazing diversity of healthy plant-based foods there. And that's just a simple fact. So, but we have to meet the market where we find it. And having had one failed vegan restaurant in LA, I was determined not to have Love Life fail because of my particular plant-based beliefs. So healthy, plant-forward restaurant. And then we'll have a really state-of-the-art fitness center. And we're working with a company out of Miami called Barwis. Mike Barwis is a famous trainer, and we're working with him, and we're going to brand that Barwis, in fact. He's very good at working with professional athletes and helping do assessments of people's physical condition and then designing custom programs to help people optimize their physical fitness. Then we'll have a spa, the massages and facials and the usual spa accoutrements, plus recovery. Like we'll have a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. We'll have cold plunges, cryotherapy, infrared saunas, etc. Lots of recoveries. We'll have pickleball. And then we have a medical center. And of course, the medical center is the biggest innovation. And so we're putting it all together. And we'll have different membership programs. You could just be a member of the fitness center, but we hope you'll also be a member of our different medical programs we'll put out there. We'll put out medical programs to help people to be, we'll call maximum performance. People might be in their 20s and 30s. How do we get them to the highest level of health and well-being they're capable of? For older boomers, we'll have a longevity program for people to be able to extend their lifespan and their health span. We'll also have programs to help people to reverse chronic diseases. We know that you can reverse obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and most autoimmune diseases are also reversible. So we're putting it all together in one rooftop. I'll tell you a story, Jason. So about the first 20 years Whole Foods Market existed, people would come in it for the first time and they would say, I've never been in a store like this. This is incredible. I've been looking for a store like this my entire life. And they fell in love with us. And when people go into our Love Life location, that's how they're going to feel. It's like, how come nobody's done this before? I've been looking for something like this my entire life. And the vision is to have a whole chain of these all around the United States. And as I say in the last chapter of my book, The Infinite Game, an infinite game is a game that never ends. Business is an infinite game. I hope Whole Foods is an infinite game that outlives me by many, many decades. And I think Love Life will outlive its co-founders as well. So very excited about it. We have a telehealth business as well. If people want to start, we already are doing business in all 50 states via telehealth. And we have a coaching program to reverse diabetes and obesity. That's an online program too, mastering weight loss, mastering diabetes. So got a big vision here of helping transform the health of America. It's similar to what my higher purpose was with Whole Foods. We're just not limiting it to food. There also will be sort of a transcendent spiritual component to the business as well. We'll have yoga classes, we'll have Pilates classes, we're going to have meditation classes, we're going to have breathwork classes. If they had legalized psychedelic therapies, we'd be doing those too. So we really want to help people to have this full, healthy, holistic life in all ways, physical, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually.
Incredible. John, we covered so much today. Is there anything else we did not cover that you'd like to go over or leave our audience with some words of wisdom or anything else you'd like to touch on before we go?
I don't know if I gave him any words of wisdom or not, but I've given it my best shot in the time we had allotted to us. You know, I always tell people, particularly young people, the same thing, which is life is short. You don't realize it when you're young. It just seems like it's going to stretch out forever, but it's really pretty short. One of the great things about writing this book, Jason, as I got to relive a lot of my life, I got to relive about 50 years of my life. And year by year, I had to think about it and put it into writing. And it was, that was an amazing journey for me. But it also, looking back, how short it all was. It just all went by so quickly. So what I always try to tell young people is life's too short to do anything but follow your heart. I really believe that each of us is called to a hero's journey. Each of us is called to go on this incredible life adventure, this incredible hero's journey. And most people are just too afraid to answer the call. People play it safe. They're afraid to fail. They're afraid that people will criticize and they'll be rejected. That's the path that leads to adventure and happiness. And so I always encourage young people, but I encourage people of any age, it's never too late to answer the call to the hero's journey. It's never too late to answer the call within your own heart that's calling you to follow some purpose that's there within you or discover it. And that's why doing things like meditation and breath work, they can help put us in touch with that quiet little voice that is ultimately the guide that we need to follow in our life. So that's my advice. And if you're young, if you start following it, oh my God, you have no idea where it may lead you. And it's going to be so much fun. And it's going to be such an adventure. Don't sell yourself short. Don't let fear cripple you.
Amen. John, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason.
I want to take a moment to invite you into our Mind, Body, Green ecosystem, where you can explore the infinite possibilities of health and well-being. All you have to do is click the subscribe button to hear more thought-provoking interviews with leaders in the health space. I am so grateful for all of you who have tuned in over the years, and let me tell you, it's only going to get better.